Back in December of 2025, before Christmas, over a month ago now, Universal Pictures released a trailer for Christopher Nolan's upcoming project, The Odyssey. This film is expected to release in July of 2026, and in some ways seems to be Nolan's most ambitious project to date, shot entirely with IMAX film cameras, which I don't think has ever been done before for a feature film, at least. I'm very excited to go see this in theaters, but I do have to say, starting with this trailer, and then given the past couple of weeks that have elapsed since this trailer was released, my excitement to see this project, my anticipation that it's going to be Nolan's greatest achievement, has been waning steadily. And we'll get into more of that later this week in a different video, but for now I just wanted to look at the trailer itself and kind of go over some things which I think are disappointing. Now, before we get into any of this, I do have to couch this all within some context and a caveat. The context being, I'm a huge fan of Christopher Nolan. I have been for many years. I love all of his films so far. I think Interstellar is probably my favorite film of all time. I was a huge fan of Oppenheimer, loved Dunkirk, loved Tenet, which some people were disappointed in, and so on. The list goes on. Every single film that I've seen by him, I've appreciated. I have, some that I like more than others, but I'm always excited to go see a Christopher Nolan film. I always enjoy them when I see them, and I'm a huge fan of his work, and I have a lot of respect and admiration for him as a director and writer and creator. And so because of that, because of his glowing track record, I am very willing to give him a lot of the benefit of the doubt. To sit here and say, okay, things don't look great, things don't sound great. I'm disappointed in certain things about this upcoming project. However, it's Christopher Nolan, right? He's proven time and again that he can make outstanding films. And there has been serious doubt about some of his choices in the past. Most famously, many people doubted his choice of casting Heath Ledger as the Joker in The Dark Knight, and that ended up being one of the most iconic performances in all of superhero movie history. So to any Christopher Nolan fans who might be watching this and might be upset because it seems like I'm bashing Nolan, I'm not. But I do think from what we've seen from this project so far, it is shaping up to be one of the most, if not the most, disappointing projects from him. And I use that word disappointment intentionally because I do think Christopher Nolan really had the capacity to make The Odyssey into a fantastic, groundbreaking adaptation. And this seems just a little meh. And the other thing I will say, the caveat that I will give before I end this preamble when we actually look at the trailer in question, is this is just a trailer. There's an old adage, don't judge a book by its cover, and I would say don't judge a film by its trailer. Trailers can be not the greatest, even if the film is fantastic. There have been plenty of Christopher Nolan films which I've loved, and then I've gone and watched the trailer out of curiosity, and it's kind of not that great. I think it's hard to look at this following on the heels of Oppenheimer, which had a fantastic trailer, one of the best trailers I think I've ever seen. Wonderfully edited, wonderfully paced, all of that was incredible, and this trailer just really falls short of that. But just because the trailer's bad doesn't actually mean that the film itself will be bad. So I'm not necessarily saying that, but it does give you an indication of certain choices that were made in the film, and some of them are disappointing. Let's take a look. Okay, first of all, that opening shot with the graves and the armor, that's cool. I like that. This, what's going on here? I mean, honestly, look, I don't really care all that much, if I'm being honest. Maybe I should, but I don't really care all that much how historically accurate the armor is. People have posted images online, I'm sure you've seen them, of the historically accurate armor from this time period that Nolan should have been using in this project. And I don't think it looks that great. I don't think it looks that visually appealing. I don't think it would really work in a film. I'm not upset that Nolan didn't go with that for this film. If he had found a way to incorporate that in a way that actually really looked cool, that would have been great. And again, it's something where I think he could have stayed true to certain things like that and worked his Nolan magic to make it actually look good and look cinematic. But I don't really care if he didn't. That's fine. But it's not just that. If we look at this shot here, and we look at Agamemnon's armor, the man is swimming in it. This is way too big for his head. And not only that, it looks sort of plasticky. It's a little too shiny. It doesn't, I get he's the king, he's the high king or whatever. So he's going to have more radiant and more polished armor than those below him. But this doesn't look like they just finished a 10-year war in any way. You can have battle-worn armor that's still polished and still looks like it's been used before. This looks like it came fresh off of the 3D printing plastic machine. And again, it just doesn't look like it fits him well. I have to say, and this isn't a bad thing, but I just thought it was funny, this is a very Nolan-esque shot. I'm not surprised we got a shot like this. I mean, we've got this sort of particles floating through the air. We've got the camera following them from behind as they move and they walk, and it's sort of the camera's couched below them, almost looking up at them to create this imposing image. So then we get this shot here following on the one before. And in the same way that Agamemnon's helmet looked way too big for him, Odysseus' helmet here looks way too small for him. It looks kind of tight. It looks like it doesn't fully cover or fit his face. Maybe they should have traded helmets. I don't know. This one just looks a little odd. It partly might be because his beard is coming out of it at the bottom, and there's nothing you can really do about that. You don't want the helmet to be artificially long or something like that to protect the beard. Whatever it is, it creates this look where it doesn't fit him well at all. So a little disappointing in that sense. And again, it's this thing where we know Christopher Nolan can make really great films with great costume design. Everything looks fantastic. I don't know what happened here. I don't know who approved this. I don't know if they were rushing through production too much or something. Why is this like this? Because it doesn't seem quite up to the standard of Nolan's production levels. You know, part of me suspects if he was maybe too focused on the cinematic aspect of it, the technical film production side of it, working to develop these new IMAX cameras so everything could be filmed in IMAX, which is great, but if it means that your costume design is going to suffer as a result, I'm not sure it's worth the trade-off.
No one could stand between my men and home.
So, as I'm sure you already know, we have Tom Holland in this project. Spider-Man is making an appearance. But we also have the return of Anne Hathaway, and I'm always going to be a fan of that. She's a great actress and has been really good in the various Nolan projects she's been in. I think it's just Interstellar and The Dark Knight Rises, but especially in Interstellar, I thought she did a great performance there. I wasn't blown away by Catwoman's performance in The Dark Knight Rises. I thought, it was fine. I didn't have particular issues that I can pinpoint with it, but I thought Dr. Brand, and Amelia Brand in Interstellar, great performance, so it's great to see her working with Nolan once again. I have high hopes for her role as Penelope. But I do have to say, the line we got just before this, nothing can stand between my men and home, I believe I might be slightly misquoting it, is kind of cliched. It's one of those lines that we'll sort of see throughout this trailer. There isn't a ton of dialogue or anything like that, but it's one of those lines that makes this trailer feel worse than other Nolan trailers we've seen in the past. And again, it's kind of cliche.
Not even me.
So, some people have complained about the look of the ships. Again, it may be historically inaccurate. Maybe I should care more about that. I don't. Honestly, I don't. I think they look cool. I do kind of get the argument that goes like this. Well, it's Nolan. We know what he's capable of. We know what he's been able to achieve as a director. So isn't it kind of disappointing that he didn't just go the extra mile to make everything as historically accurate as possible, because he had the time and the budget to do it, so that we would get kind of the adaptation of the Odyssey to end all adaptations of the Odyssey. An absolute epic cinematic masterpiece, a faithful adaptation to this timeless story, and one that really brings the Odyssey, the true Odyssey, to life, not sort of an interpretation of it. And I think that's fair. And I wouldn't have had any issue if he had done that. I would have really respected it if he had done that. But at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily going to walk out of the theater in disappointment because the ships didn't quite look like how they would have looked in that time period. Same thing with the armor. As long as it's done in a way that works, that's fine. The issues that I have with this trailer, as you might have been able to tell so far, is that the costume design is off. It looks a little weird, and things just seem kind of cliche and bland. It doesn't look like something that's going to be an absolute masterpiece of a film. Doesn't look bad, but it just doesn't look extra special. I am, however, a huge fan of the music. So that alone, I'll probably be buying the soundtrack for that alone. This shot is good. Great spectacle. Great shot. I don't know. It looks good. One of the things that has bugged me and many others about this trailer is if the film was shot entirely with IMAX cameras, why is it being presented in a trailer in this letterboxed aspect ratio? I understand that that's probably how it's going to be shown in standard theaters, maybe. Although, actually, I don't know why they would. If the entire film is the same aspect ratio because it's in IMAX, I don't understand why they would crop it down, because there are plenty of films that aren't shown in IMAX, but are shown in sort of a 16:9 aspect ratio, even though they're just on standard film stock. They're not, or on digital or whatever. They're not an IMAX film, but they don't have to be in the sort of letterboxed aspect ratio to be a standard theatrical release. So actually, I have no idea why this is being shown in a trailer in this aspect ratio, because that's not how the film was shot, and presumably it's not how it's going to be presented. I would be surprised and confused if they show the film in this aspect ratio when no part of the film is actually in this aspect ratio, right? Like, it makes sense for something like Oppenheimer, where part of the film is IMAX and part of the film is not, and it's 65 millimeter, I guess, non-IMAX sequences, and it is letterboxed. That makes sense. That, you would have a standard showing that would have everything in the letterboxed format to just crop it down. I get that. That makes perfect sense to me. But if nothing in the film is in letterboxed aspect ratio, why would you present any of it in that aspect ratio? Now, this shot here, I have to say, very, very reminiscent, almost a little too reminiscent of that scene in Dunkirk where they're hiding in the boat and the Germans start target practice on the hull of the ship as the water's coming in. And again, if that scene happens within the context of the larger film, and it's reminiscent of another scene in another film by him, that's fine. But why include it in your trailer when it just seems like you've redone something that you've already done in the past? You don't really want it to come off like you're rehashing the same sort of plot points or shots again and again in every film. It's okay if there are similarities between films, but I don't know if you need to highlight those in a trailer. But I don't know, maybe that's more of a personal take on that. I have to say, this sequence of shots here is really cool. Probably the best part of the trailer. That's when we get this shot with the reveal of the Cyclops, just sort of his shadowy figure. Very cool scene. Very cool moment of the trailer, shaping up to be a very cool scene in the film.
Promise me you will come back.
What if I can't?
I don't know. It's kind of cliche. It's kind of bland. So that's the trailer. That's Nolan's The Odyssey, coming out in July. Overall, again, I'm still eagerly anticipating it. I am still going to go see it in theaters on opening day if I can. I'm going to see it probably multiple times in theaters unless it's just absolutely horrendous. But I'm very excited to see this film. But in fairness, a lot of that excitement is fueled by what I know Nolan has done in the past. Because if I knew nothing about Nolan or hadn't seen any of his past projects, I probably might not actually go see this in theaters. A lot of my anticipation is kind of relying on the fact that I've liked what he's done in the past. And so I'm hoping that he will not disappoint and will deliver in the end on this project, despite sort of the disappointing things that we keep seeing. Anyway, with that being said, thank you for watching. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you thought of this trailer, what you're excited about with this project, what might still give you hope for it, or maybe everything gives you hope. And if you do completely disagree with my takes here, let me know. I'd be curious to hear that other perspective.